I'm in my 40s, so I'm not particularly gifted with the attention that young girls have. They look at the young, and people my age and older are more interested in beer or something stronger, like my husband, who spends most of his time in the garage, often with friends, drinking beer. So any chance I get to brighten my day, I don't pass up the moment. It was one such impulsive decision that got me into this story with my son-in-law. A week ago, my husband and I went to our daughter's wedding in a neighboring village. Naturally, we helped with all the preparations. We gathered money and things to do, set a huge table in the yard with a canopy. The day ran its course. We started drinking, sharing congratulations and wishes for the young couple. By evening, the party was in full swing. Everyone was in groups and couples, chatting and gesticulating wildly. My husband was engrossed in conversation with like-minded people, while I sat at a table chatting with my husband's sister. Eventually, I decided to go to the restroom. Since there was no street toilet nearby, I walked through the garden and eventually sat down by one of the trees. There were voices coming from the riverside and music and the noise of guests coming from the courtyard. The voices grew closer and I stood up, but sat back down when a group of guys walked past me, talking loudly amongst themselves. As the garden gate slammed shut, I realized they had already gone back into the yard, and I followed them. As I approached the gate, I saw my brother-in-law, Jack, standing there in deep thoughtfulness with his hands on the gate. I asked if I could pass, and he quickly stepped aside, apologized, and opened the gate for me. "You show up so unexpectedly, mother-in-law," he said with a smile. "Taking a break from the noise, or just getting some air?" "Both," I replied, smiling back. "By the way, my brother-in-law's name is Jack, a nice, tall guy, also handsome. He followed me into the yard, and when he saw me sitting alone at the table, he came over." The conversation was awkward at first, because we didn't have much in common. But after an hour, as the drinks flowed, I felt more at ease. Eventually, I became intoxicated and dared to loosen up a bit. When I got up to get some fresh air, Jack followed me as my daughter was busy chatting and drinking with her friends. We walked back to the gate, and he suddenly pulled me to him and kissed me. I didn't react in any way, only said, "Take your time, someone might see us." He quickly realized and said he knew a place where no one would see or disturb us. "If there is such a place, why are we still standing here?" I asked, slightly staggered from the drink. He led me along the garden fence, and after a dozen meters we turned onto a small path leading to the river. After another 10 meters we were on the lawn. Jack had already unbuttoned his pants, and soon we were lying on the grass, cuddled together. Now I understood why my daughter had married him. He was energetic, but not obnoxious. That night we did anything and everything, and got so caught up in the moment that I even lost my underwear on the lawn. The next day I hurried back to that spot, hoping no one else had found them, and maybe tonight I would be with my favorite son-in-law again, alone. The days that followed were filled with a strange excitement. Every time I saw Jack, there was an unspoken bond between us, a shared secret that seemed to shimmer beneath the surface. At family gatherings or in simple moments when we were all together, I would catch his eye, and he would bestow a knowing smile on me. It was fascinating, like a game we were both playing, but without words. The tension between us seemed to grow stronger. I thought about him constantly. One afternoon, when my husband was at work and my daughter was visiting a friend, Jack showed up unexpectedly at our house. He said he had come to help with repairs in the garage, but the way he looked at me said otherwise. I invited him in, trying to act as casual as possible, but my heart was racing. We ended up in the kitchen, and as I was pouring him a glass of water, he came up behind me, his hands gently resting on my hips. I froze for a moment and then pressed myself against him, feeling his warmth. He kissed my neck gently, and I couldn't help but close my eyes and sigh. The whole world seemed to disappear, and it was just the two of us. We moved to the living room where he pulled me onto the couch, and we kissed passionately. It was an all-consuming kiss, the kind that makes you forget everything else. My hands were in his hair and his were on my back, pulling me closer. It felt so forbidden and yet so incredibly right. The excitement made me dizzy, and soon we were back in each other's arms, losing track of time, caught up in the intensity of the moment. Later, as we lay there catching our breath, I looked up at Jack and couldn't help but smile. "You really are something else," I said, running my fingers down his arm. He grinned and pulled me closer, touching his lips to my forehead. "I guess we both are," he replied, and I couldn't help but laugh softly. It was reckless and dangerous, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it. I missed the thrill of being with him for so long, the way he made me feel alive. That night when my husband came home, I acted as if nothing had happened, but inside me everything had changed. There was a new spark in me, a sense of arousal that hadn't been there in years. And as I looked across the room at Jack, who was chatting casually with my daughter, I realized that this was far from over. We'd started something that wasn't easy to stop, as some part of me didn't want it to end. Maybe tonight, if the opportunity presented itself, we could be alone again. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. Life was suddenly so much more interesting, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next, albeit secretly, with Jack by my side.